When Dr. Thompson ridiculed a patient, he never imagined that the true owner of the hospital was sitting quietly in the corner. How does a moment of humiliation turn into a life-changing lesson for a man with everything to lose? The hospital, bustling with activity in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, was a blend of bright fluorescent lights and the soft hum of conversations. Staff scurried back and forth, and the smell of antiseptic hung in the air, creating a typical, albeit tense atmosphere for a Tuesday morning. Steve Harvey, a middle-aged man known for his jovial demeanor, sat in the waiting room. Despite his fame and fortune, he often visited the small community hospital for minor ailments, seeking a quiet escape from the public eye. With a baseball cap pulled snugly over his head, he hoped to remain unnoticed, but that plan was swiftly shattered. As he listened to a nearby doctor, Dr. Thompson, berating a visibly anxious young mother whose son was sick, Steve felt his stomach knot. "Can't you even read the chart? This is your child's health we're talking about. Pay attention." Dr. Thompson fired, his words laced with condescension. The mother's face flushed with embarrassment, tears welling in her eyes. Steve instinctively looked away, a wave of discomfort washing over him. He knew he had to intervene, but the irony of the situation made him pause. Who was he to disrupt what felt like an authoritative display? If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your comment. And there's something very important. Click the hype button. This helps a lot to deliver this content to more people. It's quick, but it makes all the difference. As the doctor continued his tirade, Steve's thoughts drifted. He recalled his own struggles in the spotlight, how he had learned to uplift others rather than tear them down. He couldn't understand how a man with such esteemed qualifications could belittle someone so vulnerable. That moment of inner conflict left him restless, but he remained seated, grappling with whether to speak out. Meanwhile, in the hospital's corridors, Dr. Thompson's arrogance was well known. He had a reputation for being a brilliant physician, but also a harsh critic of both staff and patients. His career had been built on hard work, yet he'd forgotten the empathy that had once driven him to medicine. Today, it seemed, he was only concerned with preserving his own image, oblivious to the real impact of his words. The tension in the room grew thicker as the mother, overwhelmed, left the office with her child, leaving behind a teetering silence. Deciding enough was enough, Steve finally stood up, his heart racing as he approached Dr. Thompson. "Excuse me, doctor," he began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I couldn't help but notice your interaction with that mother. Don't you think you could have been a bit kinder?" Dr. Thompson turned, surprise etched on his face. "Who are you to lecture me? This is a hospital. People need to understand the seriousness of health matters," he snapped, his demeanor shifting from surprise to indignation. Steve felt the heat rise in his cheeks, but held his ground. "It's a hospital, yes, but it's also a place where people come for help, not judgment. You may be an expert, but that doesn't give you the right to strip someone of their dignity." For a moment, the doctor's facade cracked. He wasn't used to being confronted, especially in front of others, but just as quickly he regained his composure. "You aren't even a doctor. How would you know the pressures we face?" "I know more than you think," Steve replied, his voice firm, unwilling to yield. The air between them buzzed with the weight of anticipation, the tension palpable to those nearby. As the moment hung in the air, Dr. Thompson's expression shifted from anger to contemplation. He glanced at the waiting room, where patients and their loved ones, including those who had seen their interaction, were observing closely. A realization flickered in his eyes, but it was one that would take time to fully unfold. Little did he know, Steve was not just another disgruntled visitor. He was the owner of the very hospital that had become a battleground for egos that day. The tension still crackled in the air as Steve Harvey stood his ground, looking Dr. Thompson square in the eye. The waiting room, typically a place filled with anxiety, had transformed into a stage for a confrontation that would ripple through the hospital. Patients glanced nervously at one another, unsure of what would happen next. Steve had always been a man of integrity, and this moment felt like a tipping point, not only for him but for the entire atmosphere of care within the hospital. Dr. Thompson huffed, his demeanor oscillating between indignation and uncertainty. As he turned to recompose himself, The cool, sterile air of the hospital felt suffocating to Steve. He could sense the eyes of the patients boring into his back, either in admiration for his courage or concern that he might provoke the wrath of a powerful physician. But he had faced tougher battles in life. He wasn't about to back down now, especially when he knew the stakes were about more than just this moment. As he walked away, Steve knew he needed to channel this frustration into something constructive. He had worked hard to build a reputation for his hospital, renowned not just for its medical expertise, but also for its compassion. He thought of his late mother, who always stressed the importance of kindness in healing. With a deep breath, Steve resolved to confront the doctor again, but this time with a plan. Days passed after that encounter, and Steve's resolve only intensified. The hospital was bustling with energy. Nurses moved swiftly between rooms, patients chatted quietly in their beds, and the faint sound of medical equipment filled the hallways. However, the atmosphere felt heavier now, tinged with the remnants of Dr. Thompson's arrogance. Steve knew he had to create a more collaborative environment for both patients and staff, one that emphasized respect and empathy without sacrificing the necessary rigor expected in a medical establishment. That evening, Steve summoned Dr. Thompson to his office. The doctor entered, his posture rigid and his expression combative. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, crossing his arms defensively. "Yes, I did," Steve replied, his voice calm yet firm. "I think it's time we had a conversation about how we treat our patients." He gestured toward a chair, inviting Dr. Thompson to sit. "I'm busy," Dr. Thompson snapped. "I have rounds to make." "Then consider this part of your rounds," Steve countered, refusing to let the doctor's rudeness derail him. "This is about the care we provide. It's about more than just medical knowledge. It's about how we make people feel when they are vulnerable." Dr. Thompson rolled his eyes, a dismissive gesture that nearly made Steve explode with frustration. He glanced around his office, adorned with diplomas and community awards, a testament to the hospital's legacy of compassion and care. He took a breath, reminding himself of the purpose behind this conversation. "I'm not asking you to change who you are, Dr. Thompson," Steve continued, softer now. "But I am asking you to consider the impact of your words. A patient is more than a diagnosis. They come to us for help, not for humiliation." Dr. Thompson's facade flickered for a moment, and Steve caught a glimpse of doubt in his eyes. "Look, I deal with life and death every day. I can't be soft. It's just not practical." "But it is practical," Steve insisted, leaning forward. "You can be firm in your medical advice and still be compassionate. You hold a great deal of influence here, and with that comes responsibility. I implore you to use it wisely." The silence stretched between them, tension hanging like a heavy curtain. It was a critical moment. The doctor had a reputation for being unyielding, and Steve's heart raced at the thought of losing him. The hospital relied on Dr. Thompson's skills, but the looming question remained: at what cost? Finally, Dr. Thompson sighed, the fight in him waning. "You really think I could change after all this time?" "I know you can," Steve replied, his tone unwavering. "But it starts with a choice. How about we try a different approach together?" The moment felt pivotal, and Steve understood its significance. He wasn't just advocating for patients, he was fighting for an evolution within the hospital. Only time would reveal whether Dr. Thompson would take the bait and embrace a new philosophy. But Steve had planted the seed. All he could do now was wait and see if it would grow into something transformative. The weeks dragged on after that pivotal conversation between Steve Harvey and Dr. Thompson, yet the atmosphere at Riverside Hospital felt heavy with unspoken tension. Each day, as Steve walked the polished floors and greeted patients, he wondered whether Dr. Thompson had truly absorbed his words. The doctor still carried the weight of his reputation, and Steve knew that challenging that kind of ingrained behavior would take more than a conversation. It would take time. One weekday afternoon, as Steve was preparing for his shift, he overheard two nurses discussing a recent incident. "Did you hear about the way Dr. Thompson handled Mrs. Jennings yesterday?" one nurse whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "He was brutal. Just told her she was wasting his time because she was back for the same issue. I mean, she's a patient, not a problem to solve." Steve felt a sinking feeling in his stomach, realizing his fears were materializing. It seemed the path to change was more arduous than he had anticipated. He decided to confront Dr. Thompson directly, hoping to nudge him further down the path of compassion. As Steve entered the doctor's office, he hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision to address the issue once more. "Dr. Thompson," Steve began, his voice steady but firm, "we need to talk about what happened with Mrs. Jennings. That kind of treatment isn't acceptable." Dr. Thompson cut him off, his tone sharp. "I'm a doctor, Steve. I don't have time for sentiments. Patients need to understand their health issues clearly. If they keep coming back, maybe it's a reflection of how they manage their health, not how I communicate." Steve felt frustration bubbling, but remained composed. "But it's not just about clarity. Patients can be overwhelmed and desperate. It's our job to support them, not to scold them. You have a great deal of power here, and how you use that power matters." Dr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression a blend of irritation and contemplation. "What do you suggest? A weekly support group, hand-holding?" "Maybe a more human approach could be a start," Steve replied, determined not to back down. "You may be brilliant at your craft, but every patient is a person, not just a name on a chart. Show them you care. It can change everything." With a grunt, Dr. Thompson waved a hand dismissively. "You think I'm going to change my entire practice because of a few complaints? Life's not that simple, Steve." Steve clenched his fists, fully aware he was fighting an uphill battle. "I know it's not simple, but we can grow, you can grow. If we want to attract more patients who feel valued, we must start treating them as such." The doctor's jaw tightened, and Steve sensed the unfolding tension, but he refused to relent. "I'm not trying to undermine you, Dr. Thompson. I'm trying to help the hospital prosper, and in turn, help you." As they stood in that standoff, an unexpected moment of clarity passed between them. Steve saw a flicker of something behind Dr. Thompson's hardened exterior, a hint of recognition, perhaps even vulnerability. Yet it vanished as quickly as it appeared. With a gruff voice, Dr. Thompson finally relented. "All right, fine, I'll think about it. But don't expect miracles overnight. Just give it a chance," Steve urged, hopeful. "Every small step counts." Days turned into weeks, and as the hospital continued its relentless pace, Steve made it a mission to rally some support for his cause. He started organizing small meetings with nurses, discussing ideas for patient care improvements. They brainstormed ways to make the hospital more inviting, creating a small waiting area with comfortable seating, providing patients with more detailed information about their conditions, and perhaps even introducing patient care ambassadors, staff members dedicated to making sure patients were heard and cared for. But not everyone was on board. Some staff members scoffed at the idea, dismissing it as too soft for a place focused on life and death. "This isn't a daycare, Steve," one nurse remarked during a meeting. "We're here to heal, not coddle people." Yet Steve remained resolute. "We can't heal if people are too scared or embarrassed to come to us. We need to create a culture of trust." To cement his efforts, Steve decided to gather patient testimonials. He invited those who had previously left the hospital, feeling unheard, to share their experiences. The stories poured in, vivid and heart-wrenching, and Steve realized that there was a deep-rooted need for validation and understanding. But as he prepared to present these findings to Dr. Thompson, he felt the weight of the inevitable confrontation bearing down on him. It wasn't just about sharing testimonials. It was about challenging the very core of the doctor's approach and tearing down the walls he had built around himself. The stakes were high, and failure to connect with Dr. Thompson could mean not just disappointment for himself, but a setback for the entire hospital. Would Steve's attempts to bridge the gap be enough to sway the doctor toward compassion? He could only hope. As Steve sat at his desk, the testimonials lay scattered in front of him, like a mosaic of voices yearning to be heard. Each paper held a story, a raw account of pain, neglect, and, in some cases, the light that came from understanding. He felt an intensity build within him, buoyed by the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could spark change. He summoned Dr. Thompson to his office, heart racing in anticipation of their confrontation. When the doctor arrived, he wore his trademark stoic expression, exuding confidence that bordered on arrogance. "You wanted to discuss something, Steve? I hope it's about improving patient care, not coddling them with fluff." Gathering his thoughts, Steve responded, Actually, I have some patient testimonials that I believe will shed light on the importance of empathy in our practice. It's not fluff. It's essential. Dr. Thompson's eyes narrowed, skepticism written across his face. Testimonials. We have protocols for a reason. Feelings won't heal diseases. Steve stood firm. But feelings can encourage patients to trust us, Doc. Look, these people felt neglected. They left our hospital scared and alone. We need to understand their experiences if we want to change. Pushing the testimonials across the desk, Steve held his breath, waiting for the doctor to engage. The silence stretched uncomfortably, and at last, Dr. Thompson picked one up. He scowled as he read, his expression impassive. I don't have time for this emotional nonsense. Numbers and procedures will always outweigh sentimentality. But beneath the facade, Steve saw a flicker of something, perhaps doubt creeping into the doctor's mind. And where has that gotten us? Steve pressed, his voice steadily rising with passion. Look at our patient rates. Look at how many people choose not to return. It's time for a shift. These testimonials could help us understand what we're missing. Dr. Thompson dropped the paper, irritation flaring. You think you can change how I run this hospital with a few sob stories? Steve could feel the tension rising, but he pushed on. It's not just about you, Doc. It's about the patients. You've got the medical credentials, but it doesn't make you infallible. Even the best doctors have to listen. For a moment, Dr. Thompson's mask slipped. His eyes flickered with vulnerability. Could it be guilt? Anger? Steve couldn't tell, but he sensed an opportunity. What if we set up a meeting with some of the patients? You might hear a perspective that could change your view. Dr. Thompson scoffed. You think letting them air grievances is going to help? You're wasting my time. And yet, as he spoke, Steve noticed a flicker of indecision, a crack in the doctor's armor. If you truly want to be the best, Dr. Thompson, wouldn't you be willing to listen to those who matter most, the patients? Steve's tone shifted to one softer, more earnest. Sometimes success arises from humility. Silence fell again, heavy and charged. Dr. Thompson stared at Steve, weighing the challenge laid before him. Just then the door swung open and in walked a woman in scrubs, breathless with urgency. Dr. Thompson, we have an emergency in room 3. You need to come right away. Duty calls, Doctor. Thompson muttered, tension breaking as he turned to leave. But he paused at the door, his back to Steve. I'll think about your suggestions. With that, he strode away, leaving Steve in a sea of uncertainty. Steve's heart raced, hope flickering like candlelight, but also tainted with fear. Would Dr. Thompson truly ponder what he had said, or would he shove it into the recesses of his mind, dismissing it as just another hassle? The stakes had never been higher. The potential for transformation hung in the air like a fog, both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, Steve realized the war to improve the hospital wasn't just about systems, it was about human connections. Determined, he vowed to keep pursuing this path. The next steps had to be strategic, or the effort could easily fall apart, lost amidst the rigid structures of medical efficiency. With newfound resolve, he began drafting a plan for patient engagement that promised to bridge the divide, if he could just get Dr. Thompson to listen. Steve sat in the Stark Hospital cafeteria, the hum of conversations and clinking of utensils a constant buzz in the background. He stirred his coffee absent-mindedly as he watched the hospital staff come and go, each lost in their own world of responsibilities. The thought of Dr. Thompson weighed heavily on his mind. Had he actually taken his words to heart? Did the doctor understand the importance of connecting with patients and embracing a culture of empathy? As he pored over his notes, Steve's plan began to take shape. He envisioned a program aimed at fostering dialogue between patients and medical staff, where empathy would take center stage. To do this, however, he needed to get the doctors involved, or Dr. Thompson would dismiss it as yet another bureaucratic initiative. To raise awareness, Steve decided to organize a patient engagement meeting, hoping to draw in not just nurses, but also the skeptical physicians. Over the next few days, Steve met with nurses and other support staff, rallying them around his cause. This isn't just about changing policies, he said passionately, in a small meeting room filled with skeptical looks. It's about transforming lives. When was the last time we sat down with patients and truly understood their experiences? We need their voices in this conversation. The staff began to see the value in his plan, slowly turning from doubt to intrigue. The more they discussed, the more animated the conversations became, with ideas flowing. Yet, as excitement built in this grassroots effort, the shadow of Dr. Thompson loomed. His reputation for being unapproachable and dismissive created a significant barrier. Steve grappled with the thought that the doctor might ignore the meeting, or worse, publicly ridicule the initiative. Feeling a mix of determination and anxiety, he took a day to strategize. On the morning of the scheduled meeting, the air was thick with anticipation. Steve arrived early, pacing around the conference room, adjusting chairs and fiddling with the projector. A few nurses trickled in, their chatter gradually morphing into a fervent discussion about what they would present. Would Dr. Thompson attend? Would he be open to listening? Just then, the heavy door to the conference room swung open, and in walked Dr. Thompson. He wore his customary scowl, arms crossed tightly over his white coat. A hush fell over the room. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice dripping with an air of skepticism. Steve's heart raced. This was the moment he needed to gather his courage. "Dr. Thompson, we are hoping to start a conversation about improving patient care. I believe your insights are crucial for making this initiative successful," he said, his voice steady but his palms sweating. "Doctor." Thompson raised an eyebrow but seemed taken aback by the earnestness in Steve's tone. "And why would I care what patients think? They're here for our expertise, not their opinions," he retorted, casting a dismissive glance at the nervous faces around the room. Just then, one of the nurses spoke up. "With all due respect, Dr. Thompson, it's not just about opinions. We're talking about human experiences. Patients' insights can guide us to provide better care. Isn't that what we're here for?" The doctor shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting around the room as if weighing his options. He could choose to shut it down completely or acknowledge the growing movement before him. As he contemplated this, the tension was palpable. A collective breath held by everyone present. Steve took a step forward, confident yet vulnerable. "We all know how demanding your role is, but isn't it worth taking a moment to listen, to understand? Just like you suggested to me before, sometimes it's humility that leads to real success." The words hung heavy in the air, bitterness and hope weaving a complex tapestry of emotion. Dr. Thompson's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, his defenses cracking as he contemplated the group's intentions. "Fine," he finally muttered, his voice no longer laced with derision. "I'll hear what you have to say, but don't waste my time." It was a small concession, yet it felt like a monumental shift. As the meeting finally convened, Steve felt a surge of motivation. The groundwork was set, the fight for change glowing like embers within the hearts of those gathered. Today was a turning point. With Dr. Thompson's grudging acceptance, perhaps there was a chance they could ignite real transformation in the hospital. But Steve knew they were only at the beginning of a long road ahead. The meeting room buzzed with an unexpected energy as Steve and his colleagues prepared to present their ideas to Dr. Thompson. As the minutes passed, a collective sense of purpose enveloped the attendees. They were no longer just patients seeking care. They were a united front demanding change. Steve glanced around, noting the determination in each face, and felt a profound connection to this diverse group of individuals who wished to create a more compassionate healthcare environment. Dr. Thompson sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, still exuding an air of superiority despite the small concession he had made. The walls echoed with the faint sounds of medical equipment and distant conversations from the bustling hospital outside. But inside, a different tension simmered, one of hope with a dash of skepticism. Minutes turned into hours as Steve led the discussion, presenting their views on patient care, empathy, and the importance of listening. "Thank you for giving us this chance," Steve began, his heart racing as he addressed the doctor directly. "We all understand that healthcare is complex, but at the core of it, we're all humans trying to connect and heal. If we take a step back and let patients share their perspectives, we can change the way treatment is approached." As he spoke, he could see Dr. Thompson's rigid demeanor gradually soften. The doctor's brows furrowed, and the impatience that usually radiated from him was replaced with curiosity. It was as if an invisible wall was slowly crumbling. Encouraged by this shift, Steve leaned in further, fueled by a desire for real dialogue. "Every one of us here has faced battles that you may never fully understand," he continued, gesturing toward his fellow patients. "But by letting us voice those experiences, we can build a bridge between your expertise and our real-life journeys." He could feel the room exhale the tension, replacing it with an air of validation. Just then, Dr. Thompson interjected, "You all speak passionately, but how does this change the way I practice medicine? I can't change my methods simply based on feelings." The challenge was clear, but Steve stood his ground undeterred. "Dr. Thompson," he responded earnestly, "it's not just about changing your methods but evolving them. What if you included patient feedback in your approaches? Just last week, someone mentioned how different their experience would have been if they felt more heard during their treatment. It can lead to better outcomes, better lives." The other patients nodded in agreement, their voices rising in collective support. "We can help you understand what matters to us," another patient exclaimed. "You're not just our doctor, you are a vital part of our recovery. Engage us in this journey." A flicker of realization crossed Dr. Thompson's face, but it was quickly replaced with defiance. "And what if I don't have time for all that? How will I balance my duties with patient interactions?" His question hung in the air, a challenge yet also a hint of vulnerability. Steve took a deep breath. "You might have more time than you think. Creating a culture of dialogue doesn't require hours, it can happen in minutes. A simple act of listening, of truly engaging, can reshape your practice without sacrificing efficiency. Your time is valuable, but isn't their time just as important?" Silence enveloped the room as each person absorbed his words. Dr. Thompson narrowed his eyes, weighing his next response, and a palpable tension settled in the air again. It was a standoff of sorts, one that felt rooted in years of struggle, pride, and the yearning for understanding. "Suddenly, Doctor." Thompson relented, his posture loosening, a flicker of humility breaking through his stoic exterior. "Fine, let's try it. Starting next week, I want to implement a feedback system, but if it fails, I won't hesitate to revert to my methods." Steve felt a rush of triumph, yet he understood the journey wasn't over. "That's all we ask for, a chance to work together. If it is a failure, we will learn from it. But the potential for growth is immense." As the meeting drew to a close, a glimmer of hope settled in the air. What began as a moment of humiliation for Steve had transformed into a critical pivot towards healing, not just for patients, but also for the doctor. They were no longer adversaries, but collaborators on a shared journey of transformation. Outside the meeting room, Steve's phone buzzed with a notification. Despite the victory, he felt the weight of the ongoing battle ahead. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that today had birthed the start of something profoundly different. He stepped into the hallway, newfound resolve in his heart, ready to embrace the unpredictable road that lay ahead. As Steve stepped into the hospital corridor, the weight of the day's confrontations lingered like a heavy fog. He replayed the meeting in his mind, the tension, and the strange sense of camaraderie that had emerged in the face of adversity. The walls seemed to echo with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Would Dr. Thompson truly commit to change, or was this another empty promise? A flicker of doubt crossed his mind, but he brushed it aside. Today had ignited something in him, a spark of hope. Weeks passed and the feedback system slowly began to take shape. Steve watched as his colleagues engaged with patients in new ways, gathering insights that highlighted the importance of empathy and understanding in their work. He often found himself in discussions with Dr. Thompson, who was determined, albeit begrudgingly at times, to adapt his methods. The once rigid doctor now found himself surprised by the meaningful interactions that emerged from honest dialogue with patients. One rainy afternoon, Steve was waiting in the break room when Dr. Thompson entered. He looked different, more relaxed, less detached. "Steve," he said, surprising Steve with his directness, "I've been reading through the feedback. I must admit it's been eye-opening. I didn't realize how much the little things mattered." Steve looked up, surprised but pleased. "That's great to hear, Doctor. It's about creating a culture of care, where everyone feels valued." Dr. Thompson nodded, a small smile forming on his lips, breaking his habitual stern demeanor. "I didn't want this to feel like a chore. I see now that it's not just about efficiency, but about relationships. A warmth surged through Steve as he realized the significant shift in Dr. Thompson's perspective. They were now on a path toward mutual respect and collaboration. Nevertheless, Steve remained vigilant, knowing that change could easily slip away, if not nurtured. As the months rolled on, the hospital experienced a ripple effect. Patients began to express gratitude and share stories that filled the staff with renewed energy. One day, a young girl named Lily came in for a routine procedure. She was shy, her eyes darting nervously around the brightly lit room. Steve knelt down to her level. "Hey there, Lily. How are you feeling today?" She shrugged, clutching her stuffed animal. "I'm scared. What if it hurts?" Steve glanced up to see Dr. Thompson observing intently from the door. "It's okay to feel scared," he reassured her, "but we're here to make sure you're safe. And afterwards we can pick out a blue popsicle together. How does that sound?" Lily's eyes lit up, a slight smile breaking through her anxiety. In that moment, she shifted from a terrified patient to a girl filled with anticipation. Steve glanced back at Dr. Thompson, whose expression had softened. The doctor stepped into the room, crouching down beside Steve. "I'll make sure we do everything we can to help Lily," he said, his voice gentle. The little girl looked between them, and for the first time her smile broadened. The transformation happening within the hospital wasn't just about systems or protocols, it was about real human connections, an understanding that empathy could heal wounds deeper than those treated with bandages. As the year drew to a close, Steve found himself reflecting on his journey. The change had not come easy. There were moments of frustration, doubt, and pushback. Yet every setback had led to greater resilience and deeper connections among the staff and patients alike. One evening, after a particularly rewarding day, Steve sat in his car, ready to head home. He glanced at his phone and saw a notification, a message from Dr. Thompson. "Thank you for your unwavering commitment to our patients. You've changed this place for the better. Let's continue to push forward together." A sense of fulfillment washed over Steve. His journey had been filled with trials, and he had learned that confronting challenges could lead to profound change. What began as an act of humiliation had evolved into a powerful catalyst for growth, not only for Dr. Thompson, but also for himself and everyone at the hospital. Steve smiled to himself, realizing that true transformation often begins in the most unexpected moments. He knew their work was far from over, but with each step they were building a brighter future for the patients they served. So, what did you think of this story? Leave your comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, share with your friends, and don't forget to like. But most importantly, click the hype button. Seriously, this is crucial for the channel to grow and bring more amazing stories like this to you. It only takes a second, but it helps a lot. See you next time.